Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Dhammapada Stories, Book 4, Story 3, Prince Vidudabha. Son of the king of the Kosalans, at their son, Prince Mahdi of the Lichavi line, Kusinara, Prince Bandula, son of the king of the Malas. These three princes resorted to a world-renowned teacher at Takkasila for instruction, happening to meet in a rest house outside the city. All of them studied under the same teacher at the same time, and in no long time acquiring proficiency in the various arts, took leave of their teacher, departed together, and went to their respective homes. Prince Pasanadi so delighted his father with the exhibition he gave of proficiency in the various arts that his father sprinkled him king. Prince Mahali devoted himself to the task of educating the Lichavi princess, but overexerting himself, lost sight of his eyes. Said the Lichavi princess, "Alas, our teacher has lost the sight of his eyes. However, we will not cast him out, but will support him loyally." Accordingly, they gave him a gate worth 100,000 pieces of money. Near this gate he lived, instructing the 500 Lichavi princes in the various arts. As for Prince Bandula, the princely families of the Malas bound sticks of bamboo together in bundles of 60 each, inserting a strip of iron in each bundle, suspended 60 bundles in the air, and challenged the prince to cut them down. The prince leaped 80 cubits into the air and smote them with his sword. Hearing the click of iron in the last bundle, he asked, "What is that?" When he learned that a strip of iron had been placed in each of the bundle, he threw away his sword and burst into tears, saying, "Of all these kinsmen and friends of mine, not a single one thought enough of me to tell me this fact. For I had only known it, I should have cut the bundles without causing the iron to give forth the sound." And he said to his mother and father, "I will kill every one of these princes and rule in their stead. They replied, Son, the kingdom is handed down from father to son, and it will therefore be impossible for you to do this. By various devices, they dismissed him from carrying out his plan. Whereupon he said, Well then, I will go and live with a friend of mine. And forthwith went to Savatthi. King Pasenadi, hearing that he was coming, went forth to meet him, escorted him into the city with distinguished honors, and appointed him commander-in-chief of his army. Bandula sent for his mother and father and established his residence right there in the city of Savatthi. Now one day, as the king was standing on the terrace looking down into the street, he saw several thousand monks pass through the street on their way to breakfast in the houses of Anathapindika, Kulla, Anathapindika, Visakha, and Suppavasa. Where are these reverend monks going? He inquired. Your Majesty, every day 2,000 monks go to the house of Anathapindika for food, medicine, and so forth. 500 to the house of Kulla, Anathapindika, and a like number to the houses of Visakha and Suppadasar. The king also conceived a desire to minister to the congregation of monks, and going to the monastery, invited the teacher and his 1,000 monks to take their meals in his house. For 7 days he presented alms to the teacher, and on the 7th day paid obeisance to him and said, Henceforth take your meals in my house regularly with 500 monks. Great king, the Buddhas never take their meals regularly in any one place. Many desire the Buddhas to visit them. Well then, send one monk regularly. The teacher imposed the duty on the elder Ananda. When the congregation of monks arrived, the king took their bowls and for 7 days waited upon them in person, allowing no one else to perform that office. On the 8th day, he suffered from distraction of mind and neglected to perform his duty. The monks said to themselves, In the house of a king, no one may provide seats for the monks and wait upon them unless he is expressly ordered to do so. It will therefore be impossible for us to remain here any longer. Accordingly, many departed. On the 2nd day also, the king neglected his duty, and accordingly on the 2nd day, many departed. Likewise on the 3rd day, the king neglected his duty. with the result that on that day all the remaining monks departed, with the single exception of the elder Ananda. They that are truly righteous rise above circumstances and guard the faith of families. The Tathagata had two principal male disciples, the elder Sariputta and the elder Moggallana, and two principal female disciples, Khema and Uppalavanna. Among the lay disciples, there were two principal male lay disciples, the householder Chitta and Pathika Ajivaka, and two principal female lay disciples, Velukantaki, mother of Nanda, and Kujutara. To put it briefly, all the disciples, beginning with these 8 persons, had made their earnest wish, had fulfilled the 10 perfections, and had thus acquired great merit. Likewise, the elder Ananda had made his earnest wish, had fulfilled the 10 perfections during 100,000 aeons of time, and had thus acquired great merit. Therefore did the elder Ananda rise superior to circumstances, and therefore did he remain guarding the faith of the king's house, and they provided a seat for the elder Ananda alone and ministered to him. When it was time for the monks to depart, the king came, and observing that the food, both hard and soft, had not been touched, he inquired, "Did not the noble monks come?" The elder Ananda was the only one who came, Your Majesty. "Just see the loss they have caused me," said the king. Angry at the monks, he went to the teacher and said, "Reverend sir, I prepared food for 500 monks, and Ananda, it appears, was the only one who came. The food which was prepared remains there still untouched, and the monks have not put in the sign of an appearance in my house. Pray, what is the reason for this?" The teacher, imputing no fault to the monks, replied, "Great king, my disciples lack confidence in you. It must be for that reason that they fail to come." And addressing the monks and setting forth first the conditions under which monks are not bound to visit families, and then the conditions under which it is proper for them to do so, he recited the following sutta. Monks, there are 9 traits the possession of which by a family disqualifies that family from receiving visits from the monks. Therefore, if monks have not visited that family, they are under no obligations to visit it. And if they do visit it, they are under no obligations to sit down. What are the 9? They do not rise to meet them in a pleasing manner. They do not greet them in a pleasing manner. They do not seek them in a pleasing manner. They conceal what they possess. Possessing much, they give little. Possessing food of superior quality, they give food of inferior quality. Instead of presenting their offerings respectfully, they present them disrespectfully. They do not sit to hear the Dhamma. They do not speak in a pleasing tone of voice. These monks are the 9 traits, the possession of which by a family disqualifies that family from receiving visits from the monks. Therefore, if monks have not visited that family, they are under no obligations to visit it. And if they do visit it, are under no obligations to sit down. Conversely, monks, there are 9 traits, the possession of which by a family entitles that family to receive visits from the monks. Therefore, if monks have not visited that family, it is proper for them to visit it. And if they do visit it, it is proper for them to sit down. What are the 9? They rise to meet them in a pleasing manner. They greet them in a pleasing manner. They seat them in a pleasing manner. They do not conceal what they possess. Possessing much, they give much. Possessing food of superior quality, they give food of superior quality. Instead of presenting their offerings disrespectfully, they present them respectfully. They sit down to hear the Dhamma. They speak in a pleasing tone of voice. These monks are the 9 traits, the possession of which by a family entitles that family to receive visits from the monks. Therefore, if monks have not visited that family, it is proper for them to visit it. And if they do visit it, it is proper for them to sit down. For this reason, great King, my disciples lacked confidence in you. It must be for this reason that they failed to come. Even so did wise men of old reside in a place unworthy of their confidence, and those served with respect suffer the agonies of death, and therefore go to a place worthy of their confidence. When was that? Asked the king. So the teacher related the following story of the past. Kesava, Kappa, Narada, and the king of Benares. In times past, when Brahma Datta reigned in Benares, a king named Kesava renounced his throne, retired from the world, and adopted the life of an ascetic, and 500 of his retainers followed his example and retired from the world. Thereafter the king was known As the ascetic Kesava, Kappa, the keeper of his jewels, likewise retired from the world and became his pupil. The ascetic Kesava, with his retinue, resided for 8 months in the Himalaya country, and when the rainy season began, came to Benares, seeking salt and vinegar, and entered the city for alms. The king was glad to see him, obtained his promise to live with him during the 4 months of the rains, gave him lodging in his garden, and went to visit upon him every evening and every morning. The rest of the ascetics, after living there for a few days, were so annoyed by the sounds of the elephants and other animals that they became discontented and went to Kesava and said, "Teacher, we are unhappy and are going away." "Where are you going, brethren?" "To the Himalaya country, teacher. The very day we arrived, the king obtained our promise to reside here during the 4 months of the rains. How then can we go, brethren? You did not so much as tell us when you gave him your promise. We cannot reside here any longer. We shall take up our residence not far from here, where we shall have news of you." So they paid obeisance to him and departed, and the teacher was left alone with his pupil Kappa. When the king came to wait upon him and said, "Where have the noble monks gone?" They said they were discontented, unhappy, and have gone to the Himalaya country, great king. It was not long before Kappa also became discontented. Although the teacher tried repeatedly to dissuade him from leaving, he insisted that he could endure it no longer. So he departed, going and joining the others and taking up his residence not far off, where he could receive news of the teacher. The teacher thought continually of his pupils, and after a time began to suffer from an internal complaint. The king had him treated by physicians, but there was no improvement in his condition. Finally, the ascetic said to him, "Great king, do you wish to have me get well?" "Reverend sir, if only I could, I would make you well again, this moment." "Great king, if you desire to have me get well, send me to my pupils." "Very well, reverend sir," said the king. So the king had the ascetic laid on a bed and ordered 4 ministers, led by Narada, to carry him to his pupils, saying to the ministers, "Find out how my noble elder is getting on and send me word." The pupil, Kappa, hearing that the teacher was coming, went to meet him. "Where are the others?" asked Kesava. "They live in such and such a place replied Kappa. When the others heard that the teacher had arrived, they assembled together, provided the teacher with hot water, and presented him with various kinds of fruits. At that very moment, he recovered from his sickness, and in a few days his body again took on a golden hue. Narada, Narada asked him, after leaving a king able to fulfill all desires, how, pray, does the exalted Kesi like the hermitage of Kappa? Pleasant and agreeable are the trees, delighting the heart. The well-spoken words of Kappa delight me, Narada. After eating the purest of hill paddy, boiled with meat gravy, how do you like millet and wild rice without salt? Whether the food be displeasing or pleasing, scanty or abundant, if only one can eat with confidence, confidence is the best flavor. When the teacher had ended his lesson, he identified the characters in the Jataka as follows. At that time, the king was Moggallana, Narada was Sariputta, the pupil Kappa was Ananda, and the ascetic Kesava was I myself. Thus, great king, in former times also wise men endured the agonies of death and went to a place worthy of their confidence. My own disciples lack confidence in me. I doubt not. Story of the past concluded. The king thought to himself, I must win the confidence of the congregation of monks. How best can I do it? The best way is for me to introduce into my house the daughter of some kinsman of the supremely enlightened one. In such case, the probationers and novices will come to my house with confidence regularly, thinking, the king is a kinsman of the supremely enlightened one. Accordingly, he sent a message to the Sakyas saying, give me one of your daughters. And he ordered the messengers to learn the name of the Sakya, whose daughter it was, and to return to him. The messengers went and asked the Sakyas for a maiden. The Sakyas assembled and said to each other, the king is an enemy of ours. Therefore, if we refuse to give him what he demands, he will destroy us. Moreover, he is not of equal birth with ourselves. What is to be done? Mahanama said, I have a daughter named Vasabhakatya, born of a slave woman of mine, and she is a maiden of surpassing beauty. We will give her to him. So he said to the messengers, very well, we will give the king one of our maidens. Whose daughter is it? She is the daughter of Mahanama, the Sakya, and Mahanama is the son of the uncle of the Supremely Enlightened One. The maiden's name is Vasabhakatiya. The messengers went and told the king. Said the king, if this be so, well and good, bring her to me immediately. But those princes of the warrior caste are full of deceit. That may even send me the daughter of a slave woman. Therefore, do not bring her unless she eats out of the same dish as her father. So saying, he sent the messengers back. They went to Mahanama and said, Your Majesty, the king desires that she eat with you. Very well, friends, said Mahanama. So he had his daughter adorn herself and come to him at mealtime. And he went through the form of eating with her, and then delivered her over to the messengers. The messengers escorted her to Savatthi and told the king what had happened. The king's heart rejoiced, and he straightway placed her at the head of 500 women and sprinkled her as his chief consort. In no long time she gave birth to a son, the hue of whose body was as the hue of gold. The king rejoiced thereat, and sent word to his own grandmother, Vasabhakatiya, daughter of the king of the Sakyas, has given birth to a son. Give him a name. Now the minister, who took the message and conveyed it to the king's grandmother, was a little deaf. The result was that when the grandmother, upon receiving the message, exclaimed, even before she gave birth to a child, Vasabhakatiya won the hearts of all the people, but now she must be dear to the king beyond measure. The deaf minister mistook the word Vallabha, dear, for Vidudabha, and went and said to the king, give the prince the name Vidudabha. The king thought to himself, that must be one of our old family names, and gave the child the name Vidudabha. When he was but a mere boy, the king appointed him commander-in-chief of the army, thinking that it would please the teacher. Vidudabha was brought up in princely state. When he was 7 years old, observing that the other princes received presents of toy elephants, horses, and the like from their maternal grandfathers, he asked his mother, Mother, the other princes receive presents from their maternal grandfathers, but no one ever sends me anyway. Have you no mother and father? She replied, Dear son, your grandparents are Sakya kings, and they live a long way off. That is why they never send you anything. Thus did she deceive him. Again, when he was 16 years of old, he said to her, Dear mother, I should like to go and see your family, that of my maternal grandfather. But she put him off, saying, Nay, my dear son, what would you do there? However, in spite of her refusals, he repeated his request several times. Finally, his mother gave consent, saying, Very well, you may go. He informed his father and set out with a large retinue. Vazabakatiya sent a letter ahead of him saying, I am living here happily. Let not my lords make any difference in their treatment of him. When the Sakyas learned that Vidudabha was coming, they said to themselves, It is impossible for us to pay obeisance to him. Accordingly, they sent the younger princess to the country, and when he arrived at the city of Kapila, they assembled in the royal house. Vidudabha arrived at the rest house and stopped there. They said to him, Friend, this is your maternal grandfather, and this is your uncle. As he went about, paying obeisance to all, he noticed that not a single one paid obeisance to him. So he asked, How is it there are none that pay obeisance to me? The Sakyas replied, Friend, the younger princes have gone to the country. However, they showed him every hospitality. After remaining there a few days, he departed with his large retinue. Now, a certain slave woman washed with milk and water the seat in the royal rest house on which Vidudabha had sat. And as she did so, she remarked contemptuously, This is the seat on which sat the son of the slave woman, Vazabakatiya. A certain man who had forgotten his sword went back for it, and as he took it, overheard the slave woman's contemptuous remark about the prince Vidudabha. Inquiring into the matter, he learned that Vasabhakatiya was the daughter of a slave woman of Mahanama the Sakya. And he went and informed the army, Vasabhakatiya, I am told, is the daughter of a slave woman. Immediately there was a great uproar. When Vidudabha learned of the incident, he made the following vow. These Sakyas now wash the seat whereupon I sat with milk and water. When I am established in my kingdom, I will wash my seat with the blood of their throats. When the prince returned to Savatthi, the ministers told the king everything that had happened. The king was angry at the Sakyas for giving him the daughter of a slave woman, cut off the royal honors which had been bestowed on Vasabhakatiya. Sakya and his son and degraded them to the condition of slaves. Few days afterwards, the teacher went to the royal residence and sat down. The king paid obeisance to him and said, "Reverend sir, I am informed that it was the daughter of a slave woman that your kinsman gave me. I have therefore cut off the royal honors which have hitherto been bestowed on her and her son, and have degraded them to the condition of slaves." The teacher replied, "It was not right, great king, for the Sakyas to do so. When they gave you one of your daughters, they should have given you a maiden of equal birth with yourself. But, great king, I have this also to say to you. Vasabhakatiya is the daughter of a king and received the ceremonial sprinkling in the house of a king of the warrior caste. Vidudabha also is the son of a king. What matters the family of the mother? It is the family of the father that affords the only true measure of social position. Wise men of old bestowed the honor of chief consort on a poor woman who picked up sticks, and the prince she bore became king of Benares, a city 12 leagues in extent, and bore the name Katavahana. So saying, he related the Katta Harika Jataka. The king listened to his discourse on the Dhamma, and, pleased at the thought, it is the family of the father that affords the only true measure of social position, restored to mother and son their former honors. At Kusinara, Malliga, daughter of Mallika and wife of Bandula, commander-in-chief of the army, remained for a long time childless. Accordingly, Bandula put her away, saying, "Go back again to the house of your own family." She thought to herself, "I will see the teacher before I go." Therefore she entered Jetavana, paid obeisance to the Tathagata, and waited. "Where are you going?" asked the teacher. "My husband has sent me back to the house of my family, reverend sir." "Why?" "On the ground that I am barren, having borne him no children." "If this be true, it is no reason why you should go back to your family. Return to your husband." Joyful at heart, paid obeisance to the teacher and returned to her husband's house. "Why have you returned?" he asked. "I was directed to return by him that is possessed of the 10 powers," she replied. The far-reaching one must have seen some reason, thought Bandula, and acquiesced. After a short time, Mallika conceived a child in her womb, and the longing of pregnancy arose within her. She said to her husband, The longing of pregnancy has arisen within me. What is the nature of your longing? He asked. She replied, Husband, in the city of Vesali is a lotus tank used by troops of princes at coronation festivals. I long to descend therein, to swim therein, and to drink the water thereof. Very well, said Bandula, and, and taking his bow, which required the strength of 1,000 men to string, he assisted his wife to mount the chariot and drove in his chariot from Savatthi to Vesali. Entering Vesali by the gate, which had been given to the Lichavi Prince Mahali. Now the Lichavi Prince Mahali dwelt in a house hard by the gate, and when he heard the rumble of the chariot on the threshold, he said to himself, That is the sound of Bandula's chariot. There is trouble in store for the Lichavi princess today. Both within and without the lotus tank were posted strong guards, and the tank was covered overhead by an iron grating with meshes so small that not even birds could get through. But Bandula, commander-in-chief of the army, descended from his chariot, smote the guards with his staff, and drove them away. Then he tore down the grating, entered the lotus tank, and permitted his wife to bathe therein. And having himself bathed therein, he departed from the city and returned by the same road by which he came. The men of the guard reported the matter to the Lichavi princess. Thereupon the Lichavi princess were filled with rage, and mounting 500 chariots, they departed from the city, saying, We will capture Bandula and Mallika. Thereupon the Lichavi princess were filled with rage, and mounting 500 chariots, they departed from the city, saying, We will capture Bandula and Mallika. Mahali said to them, Do not go, for he will kill every man of you. But they replied, We will go all the same. Well then, turn back when you see his chariot sink into the ground up to the nave. If you do not turn back, then you will hear before you, as it were, the crash of a thunderbolt. Then you must not fail to turn back. If you do not turn back, you will see a hole in the yokes of your chariots. Turn back then. Go no farther. But in spite of Mahali's warnings, they did not turn back, but pursued him. Mallika saw them and said, There are chariots in sight, husband. Very well. When they appear as a single chariot, tell me. So when all of them appeared as a single chariot, she said, It looks like the front of a single chariot. Well then, said Bandula, take these reins, and give the reins. He stood up in the chariot and raised his bow. Thereupon the wheels of his chariot sank into the ground up to the nave. Although the Lichavi princess saw his chariot sink into the ground, they did not turn back. After going a little way, Bandula twanged his bowstring, the sound whereof was as the crash of a thunderbolt. Not even then did his enemies turn back, but continued their pursuit just the same. Then Bandula, standing in his chariot, let fly a single arrow. The arrow made a hole in the front of each of 500 chariots, passed through the body of each of 500 princes at the spot where he wore his girdle, and then entered the earth. But the Lichavi princes, unaware that they were pierced through and through, cried out, "Halt where you are! Halt where you are!" So saying, they continued their pursuit. Bandula stopped his chariot and said, "You are all dead men. I will not fight with the dead." "Do we look like dead men?" they asked. "Well then," replied Bandula, "loosen the girdle of the foremost of your band." They loosened his girdle. The instant it was loosened, he fell down dead. Then said Bandula, "You are all in the same plight as your leader. Go to your own homes. Settle such of your concerns as need to be settled. Give final instructions to your sons and your wives, and then take off your armor." They did so, whereupon all of them fell down dead. Then Bandula conducted Mallika to Savati. 16 times Mallika bore twin sons to Bandula, and all of them were valiant men, endowed with great strength. All of them attained perfection in the several arts. Each of them had a retinue of 1,000 men, and when they accompanied their father to the royal residence, the palace court was filled with their numerous company. One day, some men who had been defeated in a false suit in court saw Bandula approaching, and with loud cries of protest told him of the unjust actions of the judges. Bandula thereupon went to the court and decided the case in such wise as to make the rightful owner the actual owner. The populace applauded him with loud shouts of approval. The king asked, "What is this commotion about?" When he heard the explanation, he was pleased, and removing all those judges, he turned over the administration of justice to Bandula alone, who thereafter rendered just judgments. The former judges, who suffered severe loss from the cutting off of their bribes, created dissensions among the members of the royal family, saying, "Bandula aspires to the throne." The king believed their talk and was unable to control his feelings. But thought he, if this man is killed right here, I shall be severely blamed. On second thought, he suborned men to make an attack on his own frontier. Then he summoned Bandula and set him forth, saying, I am informed that the frontier is in a state of insurrection. Take your sons with you and go capture the brigands. And he sent with him a sufficient number of powerful warriors besides, saying to them, cut off the heads of Bandula and his 32 sons, and bring them to me. When Bandula reached the frontier, and the hired brigands heard that the commander-in-chief had come, they fled. Bandula rendered the country habitable once more, restored peace, and then set out on his return. When he reached a place not far from the city, those warriors attacked him and cut off his head and the heads of his sons. That day, Mallika had invited the 2 chief disciples to her house, together with 500 nuns. And that very morning, they brought and gave her a letter reading as follows: Your husband's head has been cut off, and likewise the heads of your sons. When she learned the news, she said not a word to anyone, but put the letter in a fold of her dress and ministered to the congregation of monks as if nothing had happened. Now it happened that while her servants were serving food to the monks, they brought in a jar of ghee and let the jar fall and break before the very eyes of the elders. The captain of the faith said, no notice should ever be taken of the breaking of anything that is capable of being broken. Thereupon Mallika, drawing the letter from the fold of her dress, said, they have just brought me this letter. The head of your husband has been cut off, and the heads of your 32 sons likewise. Yet, even when I heard this, I took no thought. Much less, therefore, am I likely to take thought of the breaking of a mere jar, Reverend Sir. The captain of the faith recited the stanzas beginning, unmarked, unknown is the life of mortals here, and having taught the law, rose from his seat and went to the monastery. Mallika summoned her 32 daughters-in-law and admonished them as follows: your husbands were free from guilt, and have merely reaped the fruit of misdeeds in previous states of existence. Grieve not, nor lament. Cherish no resentment against the king. The king's spies listened to her words and went and told the king that they cherished no hatred of him. The king was overcome with emotion, went to Mallika's residence, asked Mallika and her daughters-in-law to forgive him, and granted Mallika a boon. I accept, said she. So when the king had departed, and she had given the feast in honor of the dead. She bathed, and approaching the king said, "Your Majesty, you granted me a boon. I desire nothing other than this, that you permit me and my 32 daughters-in-law to return to the homes of our families." The king consented, and she thereupon sent her 32 daughters-in-law to their respective homes, and herself went to the city of Kusinara, to the house of her own family. The king appointed to the post of commander-in-chief of the army Digga Karayana, a nephew of the former commander-in-chief Bandula. And Digga Karayana went about reviling the king and saying, "It was the king that killed my uncle." From the day the king killed the guiltless Bandula, he suffered from remorse, had no peace of mind, and experienced no pleasure in ruling. Now at that time the teacher was in residence near a small village of the Sakyas named Ulumpa. The king went thither, pitched camp not far from the grove where the teacher resided, and thinking, "I will pay my respects to the teacher," went to the monastery accompanied by a small retinue, giving the 5 symbols of royalty to Digga Karayana. He entered the perfume chamber alone. When Pasanadi entered the perfume chamber, Karayana took the 5 symbols of royalty and made Vidudabha king. Then, leaving behind a single horse and a single female servant for Pasanadi, he went to Savatthi. The king held sweet converse with the teacher and then came out. Not seeing the army, he questioned the woman, and from her learned what had happened. "I will take my nephew with me and capture Vidudabha," said the king, and went to the city of Rajagarh. It was late in the day when he reached the city, and the gates were closed. Exhausted by exposure to the wind and the sun, Pasanadi lay down in a certain rest house and died there in the night. As the night grew bright, they heard the voice of that woman lamenting, "King of Kosala, you have lost your protector." And they went and told the new king. Thereupon Vidudabha performed the funeral rites over the body of King Pasanadi with great pomp. When Vidudabha became king, he remembered his grudge, and saying to himself, "I will slay all the Sakyas," he set out with a large army. On that day, as the teacher surveyed the world at dawn, he saw the impending destruction of his kinfolk, and thinking, "I must protect my kinsfolk," he went on his round of alms in the morning, and returning from his alms pilgrimage, lay down lion-like on his right side in the perfumed chamber, and in the evening went through the air and sat down at the foot of a tree with scanty shade in the vicinity of Kapilavatu. Not far from there, on the boundary of Vidudabha's kingdom, stood a great banyan tree, giving dense shade. Vidudabha, seeing the teacher, approached him, paid obeisance to him, and said, Reverend sir, why do you sit at the foot of this tree with scanty shade when it is so hot? Sit at the foot of this banyan tree which gives dense shade, Reverend sir. Be not concerned, great king. The shade of my kinsman keeps me cool. The teacher must have come for the purpose of protecting his kinsfolk, thought Vidudabha, and having paid obeisance to the teacher, he turned and went back to Savatthi. The teacher rose into the air and returned to Jetavana. The king remembered his hatred of the Sakyas and went forth the second time, but seeing the teacher in the same place, turned back. Again the third time he went forth, but seeing the teacher in the same place, turned back. But when he went forth the fourth time, the teacher, surveying the former deeds of the Sakyas and realizing the impossibility of averting the consequences of the evil deed they committed by throwing poison into the river, refrained from going the fourth time. Vidudabha therefore went forth with a large force, saying, I will slay the Sakyas. Now the kinsmen of the supremely enlightened one do not slay their enemies, but are willing to die rather than take the lives of others. Therefore, they said to themselves, we are trained and skillful. We are expert archers and adepts with the long bow. Since it is unlawful for us to take the lives of others, we will put them to flight by a display of our skill. So they put on their armor and went forth and began battle. The arrows they shot sped through the ranks of Vidudabha's men, passing between their shields and through the holes for their ears, without hitting a man. When Vidudabha saw the arrows fly, he said, I have understood it to be a boast of the Sakyas that they do not kill their enemies, but they are now killing my men. One of his men asked him, Master, why do you turn and look about you? The Sakyas are killing my men. Not one of your men is dead. Pray, have them counted. He had them counted and perceived that he had not lost one. As Vidudabha turned back, he said to his men, I direct you to kill all those who say, we are Sakyas, but to spare the lives of those who follow Mahanama the Sakya. The Sakyas stood their ground, and having no other resources, some took blades of grass in their teeth, while others held reeds. Now the Sakyas would rather die than utter an untruth. So when they were asked, are you Sakyas or not? Those who held blades of grass in their teeth said, not Saka for third, but grass. While those who held reeds said, not Saka for third, but reed. The lives of those who followed Mahanama were spared. Those of the Sakyas who held blades of grass in their teeth came to be known as grass Sakyas, and those who held reeds as reed Sakyas. Vidudabha slew all the rest, sparing not even infants at the breast. And when he had set flowing a river of blood, he washed his seat with the blood of their throats. Thus was the stock of the Sakyas uprooted by Vidudabha. Vidudabha captured Mahanama, the Sakya, and set out to return. When it was time for breakfast, he stopped at a certain place and thought to himself, I will now have breakfast. When the food was brought to him, he said to himself, I will eat with my grandfather, and sent for him. Now, members of the warrior caste would rather give up their lives than eat with the sons of slave women. Therefore, Mahanama, seeing a certain lake, said, Dear grandson, my limbs are dirty. I wish to go and bathe. Very well, grandfather, go and bathe. Mahanama thought to himself, if I refuse to eat with him, he will kill me. That being the case, it is better for me to die by my own hand. So taking down his hair, he knotted it at the end, thrust his great toes into his hair, and plunged into the river. By the power of his merit, the abode of the Nagas manifested signs of heat. The king of the Nagas, considering within himself, what does this mean? Went to him, caused him to sit within his hood, and carried him to the abode of the Nagas. There he dwelt for 12 years. Vidudabha sat down and thought, now my grandfather will come. Now my grandfather will come. Finally, after his grandfather had, as he thought, tarried an excessive long time, he caused the lake to be searched by lamplight, even examining the insides of his followers' clothing. Seeing him nowhere, he made up his mind. He must have gone and departed. During the night, Vidudabha reached the river Achiravati and pitched camp. Some of his followers lay down in the bed of the river on a bed of sand. Others lay down on the banks on solid earth. Now those who lay in the bed of the river had not been guilty of sin in previous states of existence, but those who lay on the banks had been guilty of sin in previous states of existence. It so happened that ants came out of the ground where they lay. So they rose, saying, there are ants where we are lying. There are ants where we are lying. And those who had not been guilty of sin went up out of the bed of the river and lay down on solid earth, while those who had been guilty of sin descended and lay down on the bed of sand. At that moment a storm came up, and there was an incessant downpour of rain. The flood filled the bed of the river and carried Vidudabha and his retinue out to sea, and all of them became food for fishes and tortoises. The multitude began to discuss the incident. The slaying of the Sakyas was unjust. It was not right to say the Sakyas must be killed and to smite them and kill them. The teacher heard the discussion and said, monks, if you regard only this present existence, it was indeed unjust that the Sakyas should die in such wise. What they received, however, was entirely just, considering the sin they committed in a previous state of existence. What was the sin they committed in a previous state of existence, Reverend Sir? In a previous state of existence, they conspired together and threw poison into the river. Again, one day in the hall of truth, the monks began a discussion. Vidudabha slew all those Sakyas, and then, before the desire of his own heart had been fulfilled, he and his numerous company were swept out to sea and became food for fishes and tortoises. A teacher came in and asked, "Monks, what is it you are gathered here now talking about?" When they told him, he said, "Monks, before the desire of these living beings be fulfilled, even as a mighty flood overwhelms a sleeping village, so the Prince of Death cuts short their lives and plunges them into the four oceans of suffering." So saying, he pronounced the following stanza: "Even while a man is gathering flowers and is absorbed in pleasure, death comes and carries him off, as a mighty flood overwhelms a sleeping village." Book 4, Story 4, The Shortness of Life. The story goes that a god named Garland Weaver, Malabari, entered the pleasure garden in the world of the 33, accompanied by 1,000 celestial nymphs. 500 of these nymphs climbed trees and threw down flowers. 500 others gathered up the flowers that fell and decked the god therewith. One of these nymphs, even as she sat on the branch of a tree, passed from that state of existence, her body vanishing like the flame of a lamp, and received a new conception in Savatthi, in a certain family of station. Born with the recollection of her former states of existence, and remembering that she had been the wife of the god garland weaver, she made offerings of perfumes and garlands when she grew up, making the earnest wish to be reborn with the former husband. When she was 16 years of age, she married into another family, and even then, whenever she gave the monks ticket food, or fortnightly food, or food for the season of the rains, she would say, "May these offerings assist me to obtain rebirth with my former husband." Said the monks, "This woman, ever busy and active, yearns only for a husband." Therefore they called her husband honorer, Pati Pujika. She cared regularly for the hall of assembly, supplied water for drinking, and provided seats for the monks. Whenever others desired to give ticket food or fortnightly food, they would bring it and give it to her, saying, "Dear lady, pray present these to the congregation of monks." Going to and fro in this manner, she obtained at one and the same time the 56 qualities of goodness. She became pregnant, and at the end of 10 lunar months gave birth to a son. When her son was old enough to walk, she gave birth to another son, and then to another, until she had 4 sons. One day she gave alms, rendered honor to the monks, listened to the Dhamma, and kept the precepts, and at the end of that day died of some sudden sickness, and was reborn with a former husband. During all that time, the other celestial nymphs were decking the god with flowers. When the god garland weaver saw her, he said, "We have not seen you since morning. Where have you been?" "I passed from this existence, husband." "What do you say?" "Precisely, husband." "Where were you reborn?" "In a family of station at Savatthi." "How long a time did you remain there?" At the end of the 10th lunar month, I issued from the womb of my mother. When I was 16 years old, I married into another family. I bore 4 sons, gave alms, and rendered honor to the monks, making an earnest wish to return and be reborn with you, husband. How long is the life of men? Only 100 years. So short as that? Yes, husband. If men are reborn with so short a time as that to live, do they spend their time asleep and heedless? Or do they give alms and render honor? What say you, husband? Men are ever heedless, as if reborn with an incalculable number of years to live, as if in no wise subject to old age and death. The god Garland Weaver was greatly agitated. Said he, if, as you say, men are reborn with only 100 years to live, and lie heedless and sleep, when will they ever obtain release from suffering? Now 100 of our years are equivalent to a night and a day in the world of the 33 gods. 33 such nights and days make up 1 month. 12 such months make up a year, and the length of their lives is 1,000 such celestial years, or in human reckoning 36 million years. Thus it was that for that god not a single day had passed, nay, not more than a moment of time. Therefore thought he to himself, if the life of men is so short, it is highly improper for them to give themselves up to a life of heedlessness. On the following day, the monks, on entering the village, found the hall of assembly uncared for, no seats provided, no water supplied for drinking. Where is husband Honorer? Said they. Reverend sirs, how could you expect to see her? Yesterday, in the evening, after your reverences had eaten and departed, she died. Thereupon monks, who had not yet attained the fruit of conversion, remembering her kindly services to them, were unable to restrain their ears, while monks who had attained our hardship were overcome with religious emotion. After eating their breakfast, they went to the monastery and asked the teacher, Reverend sir, husband Honorer, busy and active, performed all manner of works of merit and yearned only for her husband. Now she is dead. Where was she reborn? Monks, she was reborn with her own husband. But, Reverend sir, she is not with her husband. Monks, she earned not for that husband. Her husband was the god Garland Weaver in the world of the 33. She passed from that state of existence while decking him with flowers. Now she has returned to where she was before and has been reborn with him. Reverend sir, is what you say true? Yes, monks, what I say is true. Oh, how short, Reverend sir, is the life of creatures in this world. Early in the morning she served us with food, and in the evening she sickened and died. The teacher replied, yes, monks, the life of creatures in this world is indeed short. Therefore, while creatures in this world yet yearn for the things of earth and have not yet satisfied their desires for sensual pleasures, death overpowers them and carries them off, wailing and weeping. So saying, he pronounced the following stanza. even while a man is gathering flowers, while his heart is absorbed in pleasure, even before he has satisfied his desires, death overpowers him. Dhammapada Stories, Part 2, Book 4, Story 6. Pathika Ajivaka. At Savatthi, we are told, the wife of a certain householder ministered to the needs of a naked ascetic named Pathika, treating him as she would her own son. Of her nearest neighbors, those who went to hear the teacher preach the Dhamma returned, praising the virtues of the Buddhas in manifold ways, saying, "Oh, how wonderful is the preaching of the Buddhas!" When the woman heard her neighbors thus praise the Buddhas, she desired to go to the monastery and hear the Dhamma. So she put the matter to the naked ascetic, saying, "Noble sir, I desire to go and hear the Buddha." But as often as she made her request, the naked ascetic dissuaded her from going, saying, "Do not go." The woman thought to herself, "Since this naked ascetic will not permit me to go to the monastery and hear the Dhamma, I will invite the teacher to my own house and hear the Dhamma right here." Accordingly, when it was evening, she summoned her own son and sent him to the teacher, saying to him, "Go, invite the teacher to expect my hospitality for tomorrow." The boy started out, but went first to the place of residence of the naked ascetic, saluted him, and sat down. "Where are you going?" asked the naked ascetic. "By my mother's direction, I am going to invite the teacher." "Do not go to him." "All very well, but I am afraid of my mother." "I am going. Let the two of us eat the fine things prepared for him." "Do not go." "No, my mother will give me a scolding." "Well then, go. But when you go and invite the teacher, do not say to him, 'Our house is situated in such and such a place, in such and such a street, and you may reach it by taking such and such a road.' Instead, act as if you lived nearby, and when you leave, run off as if you intended to take a different road and come back here." The boy listened to the instructions of the naked ascetic, and then went to the teacher and delivered the invitation. When he had done everything according to the instructions of the naked ascetic, he returned to the latter. Said the naked ascetic, "What did you do?" Said the boy, "Everything you told me to do, noble sir." "You have done very well. Now we shall both of us eat the good things prepared for him." On the following day, very early in the morning, the naked ascetic went to that house, taking the boy with him, and the two sat down together in the back room. The neighbors, that house with cow dung, decked it with the 5 kinds of flowers, including the larger flower, and prepared a seat of great price. that the teacher might sit therein. Men who are not familiar with the Buddhas know nothing about the preparation of a seat for them, nor do the Buddhas ever need a guide to direct them on their way. For on the day of enlightenment, when they sit under the bo tree, causing 10,000 worlds to quake, all paths become plain to them. This path leads to hell. This path leads to the world of beasts. This path leads to the world of ghosts. This path leads to the world of men. This path leads to the world of the gods. This path leads to the deathless, to great Nibbana. There is never any need of telling them the way to villages, market towns, or other places. Therefore, the teacher, very early in the morning, took bowl and robe, and went straight to the house of the great female disciple. She came forth from the house, saluted the teacher with the 5 rests, escorted him into the house, poured water of donation into his right hand, and gave him the choicest of food, both hard and soft. When the teacher had finished his meal, the female lay disciple, desiring to have him pronounce the words of thanksgiving, took his bowl, and the teacher with his own sweet voice began the address of thanksgiving. The lay disciple listened to the preaching of the Dhamma and applauded the teacher, saying, "Well said, well said." The naked ascetic, sitting there in the back room, heard the words of applause uttered by the lay disciple. As she heard the teacher preach the Dhamma, unable to control himself, he remarked, "She is my disciple no longer," and came out. And he said to the lay disciple, "Hag, you are lost for applauding this man thus." And he reviled both the female lay disciple and the teacher in all manner of ways, and then ran off. The lay disciple was so embarrassed by the naked ascetic's insulting words that her mind became completely distraught, and she was unable to concentrate her attention on the teacher's discourse. The teacher asked her, "Lay disciple, are you unable to fix your mind on my discourse?" "Good and reverend sir," she replied, "my mind is completely distraught by the insulting words of this naked ascetic." Said the teacher, "One should not consider the talk of such a heretic. One should pay no attention to such as he. One should regard only one's own sins of commission and omission." So saying, he pronounced the following stanza: "Not the faults of others, not things done and left undone by others, only one's own sins of commission and omission should one regard."